Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I want to talk to you for a bit about Detroit Become Human, because this is legitimately great. I was super surprised when I picked this up and played it, because for those of you who are familiar with the history of David Cage and his game studio, you would know that them putting out something that is legitimately great is a real surprise, because they did games like Fahrenheit, which was good right up until the second half, then it kind of lost its shit and never got it back. There was Heavy Rain, which was not great overall, but it did have some high marks. Then there was Beyond Two Souls, which was terrible. And we're not going to talk about Omicron the Nomad Soul, because that's far enough back to be irrelevant to this discussion. So when Detroit Become Human comes along, and basically just throws all of that out of the water and makes something that is legitimately, like, no real conditions to saying this, no real asterisks and small print, great. It's impressive, so I want to talk about it. I played this on PlayStation 5 via the PlayStation Plus Instant Collection, or whatever it is they're calling it, where you get 20 PS4 games if you subscribe to the service. And this just proves how much more of a ridiculous value that service is. But
what do you want?
yes, I played this on PS5. All this footage was recorded on PlayStation 5 using its built-in recorder. It does appear to be running at its full 1440p-ish resolution. I did have more or less a solid experience with it, although there was once or twice where the game started to stutter, but going back to the game's main menu and reloading from where I started basically worked fine. So it ran and played perfectly fine throughout my entire time with it. And you will hopefully be able to see that throughout this 45 minutes or so of footage that I have here for you. So, what's the game about? It's 2038 and humanity has invented androids. And these androids are kind of on a really low rung of the ladder of society right now. They are treated very poorly. They're more toys than any sort of like being with rights or freedoms. They are basically told to do something and they do it. However, things have been getting a little bit out of hand as of the beginning of the story, where androids have been going deviant, which basically means that they have been breaking through their orders and going off on their own. So you play as one of three characters in this slowly developing situation. The one that you're seeing on screen right now has to be my favorite, and that's Connor, the entirely autistic detective robot. He is assigned to try and figure out why so many androids are going deviant as the problem slowly gets worse in front of him. Then you've got two other characters. You've got Kara, who is a housemaid who ends up in a bad position and ends up running away with a daughter of her owner. And then you have Marcus, who is also in a bad situation and ends up, well, I'm not going to spoil what happens to him that really gets him started, but he kind of ends up in the same situation. He ends up running away. He ends up on his own, and he ends up running into some more like-minded androids, and things start to blossom from there. I'll try and avoid as many spoilers as much as possible, but as I've already said, this game is great, and if you have any way to access it before you actually watch this video, I recommend that you do. I won't go into spoilers without warning you straight up, but for now that's about as far as I'm willing to go into the story, because it actually develops really well, and some of the events that happen in it are really fun to just watch happen instead of having them be spoiled for you. But nevertheless, how does this game play? If you've played a David Cage game before that isn't Omicron the Nomad Soul, you know exactly what is the deal here. So the controls are simple, QuickTime-esque events, where you push the analog stick in a certain direction, you hold a certain combination of buttons, or you physically move your controller around a little bit in order to get the action that you want to happen. And this is combined with some simple walking around an environment and investigating, and some high-speed, high-action, QuickTime events which really do make use of those prompts. So let's talk about the walking around and examining things first. And this has to be one of the most slipstreamed and polished things that David Cage, or even this entire sort of genre of like adventure games, think Telltale games, has ever been in terms of a gameplay standpoint. It's very smooth to control. It's very easy to figure out what you need to do, and it doesn't jerk you around anywhere near as much as any of the previous games from this developer. So, again, you wander around, you look for objects to interact with, you use simple QuickTime-esque events to interact with them, and that's basically it, at least for this section. And there are a couple of major improvements that have been made, at least from the last game that I played, which was Heavy Rain. I didn't play Beyond Two Souls because I heard it was garbage through and through, but yes, back when I played Heavy Rain, some of these things did not happen. But here, this new camera that you're seeing on screen right now, or at least I hope you're seeing on screen right now, this new third-person camera has to be the best thing about the game in this mode, because in at least Fahrenheit, which is the one I clearly remember, you had these fixed camera angles where you could wander off in a different direction and have the camera angle change, but the game didn't automatically assume what direction you were going in was going to stay the same, so you'd walk into a new camera angle and suddenly you'd find yourself walking in a completely different direction. This game thankfully lets you use this new third-person camera to do things like examine the world and interact with objects, and it's basically the equivalent of going from Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater to Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence. It's really well done. It doesn't jerk you around in any particular way. And there are a couple of things that have been added to it as well to really help you along the process of doing things like examining evidence or looking for objects that you need in order to get a specific thing done. So there's this thing that you can invoke by holding R2. And it shows you all of the interactable objects that you can see within a set distance. So you can't just hold R2 in order to see literally everything you can interact with in a level. You need to be able to see it and you need to be close to it. But it means that you don't have to spend ages looking around for all the different things that you need to look at, because they are in this area that is filled with all of this detailed environmental work that looks absolutely gorgeous, but we'll get to that. So you can get around the environment, you can look for all the clues that you need, and you can do it all really simply. You don't have to worry too much about going too far out of the way, because the game will point you back in the right direction. And of course, you do have to worry about the whole branching things thing that is going on, because if you've played a game like a Telltale game before, where you've played through and it's like, it always says your choices will matter at the beginning of the story. And in some Telltale games this can be true, but in most of them it's not. There are so few meaningful things that tend to change from, say, chapter to chapter of a full playthrough of, say, let's say one season of The Walking Dead. You can't change particular things. There are certain characters who are determined to survive all the way through. There are some things that you are forced to do, and it just doesn't feel like a very good use of the choose-your-own-adventure style of storytelling. Detroit Become Human, to put it in an overused meme, nails it. It has so many variations on events. It has so many different little paths that you can take to go through the story. It has so many different things that can happen to all the characters that it legitimately becomes completely bonkers by the end. So, not to spoil anything, I'm still not spoiling anything, but in the second to last chapter of the game, you may only see 10% of it, because there are so many ways you can come into and exit that chapter that you might not end up seeing anywhere near all of it in one go. And then the final chapter, depending on your actions in the previous chapters, has 2 completely separate and fully detailed flowcharts full of individual events, choices, and just general actions that you can take for each character of the 3. So, in order to see everything this game has to offer, you have to play through it at least twice all the way through. It is legitimately impressive just how many little details there are. And there were... The one thing that sold this for me immediately when I started to play the game was that prologue chapter. If you were around back when they first announced Detroit Become Human, and you saw the chapter with the android taking the little girl hostage on the skyscraper, and you go in as Connor to try and solve it, if you saw that trailer and saw the amount of things you could do in that in order to successfully or unsuccessfully save the kid, it follows through on that promise throughout the entire game with the amount of choices that you can make, with the amount of things that can be affected chapter to chapter, and the fact that your main characters can die before the halfway point and not come back. Now, there is a way that you can avoid this if you aren't a fan of this particular approach. There is a difficulty setting that you can set where there's an easy mode, which basically makes it so that the quick time events are softened up a bit and your characters can't die no matter what happens. But I played on the experience mode, where the quick time events were challenging and I actually stood a chance at losing people. I didn't lose people, but I got close. The quick time events are actually surprisingly in-depth and very easy to fail if you're not paying attention, but at the same time, the prompts are nice and big on screen. You're given more than, well, not so much more than enough time, but enough time in a reasonable sense in order to hit all of those little quick time events. And there are even some neat details that come through on that as well. Like, for example, if your character gets shot in the penultimate encounter towards the end of the game, they'll carry that damage through all the way through to the end of the game, noticeably. And it's really impressive how much detail they manage to actually have in just even those tiny things, like how many times you get hurt in the middle of a quick time event. It's legitimately great. It all comes to a head, and it was all made the most impressive to me personally. And again, no spoilers here, but there's this location that Connor needs to track down at one point in the game. It's quite later on. And you are given access to all the evidence that you have managed to find throughout the game, including people or androids that might have died along the way, evidence you might have collected, and it's entirely possible that you could have failed all of these missions as you were going through. So you might have very little evidence to work with, to the point where you might be absolutely doomed and not actually able to finish the investigation. I'm honestly not sure, but it's still really damn impressive nonetheless. And I can't help but applaud the amount of detail that's gone into this flowchart work. Every single time I opened up a flowchart in a new chapter and thought to myself, oh good lord, there is so much stuff to see here. I just thought to myself, it's impressive. It's legitimately really impressive, and it does bring a whole new meaning to the whole your choices matter sort of thing that Telltale are always trying to push. As a result, playing Detroit Become Human is simply really well done. The game itself gives you everything you need. You have very comfortable and usable third-person camera. Being able to see all the objects around you means that you don't have to spend ages looking for something in particular in the middle of all this nonsense. The quick time events work great. The controls are spot on for the most part. There are a couple of times where I had it act up just a little bit, but nothing like way too far out of the ordinary. I really did feel like my choices mattered and that I was consistently in danger, whether it be from failure or actual death. So, as a result, the story ended up being really engaging. It is one of the best implementations of the whole your choices matter, choose your own adventure, branching narrative, you name it in that sense. This game has it. So is the story itself any good?
Lieutenant.
Well, I'm also happy to report that that's a definite yes. Now, I'm probably going to get into what might be considered spoilers here, but just the weird thing about this game is that in a lot of different cases, it seems that the events of the game can change so drastically that it feels kind of weird saying something's a spoiler when it's actually a choice. But I'll do my best to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. But basically, you've got your three characters. You've got Connor, you've got Marcus, you've got Kara. And they all go about their ways in the world, and their stories interact sometimes. And the one that doesn't really come into it that often is Kara, which kind of disappoints me, because a lone android on the run in the middle of this universe that hates androids would actually be a really neat idea if she actually stuck around in the actual city of Detroit for long enough. But the problem with her plot is that she has this annoying tendency to turn up, excuse me, in a lot of weird, just sort of standalone set pieces that don't seem to matter that much to the overall state of the plot. And it ends up being kind of weird seeing her only interact with the main story characters twice, and then she's just kind of on her own for the entire rest of the game. And I don't mind it, because the story is still quite enjoyable. And I like watching her deal with the situations that she comes up with, but it ends up all being kind of a little bit unbelievable, because this is all supposed to take place in Detroit, and that's one city, to my knowledge. I hope I'm not that unfamiliar with American states and cities, but she tends to go traveling for a really long time, only to end up right in the place where everyone else is at the time where it's most convenient, and it ends up being a bit just too coincidental for my tastes, but it's held up by her relationship with the daughter and a couple of other characters who come along the way. And I will point out, while my mind is on it, that every single performance in this game is a good performance. It doesn't matter like who you pick, throw a dart. Everyone here is well acted, they're well motion captured, and especially when it comes to the androids, because you obviously expect the androids to be a fair bit robotic, to have more stable speech, to have different ways of talking in comparison to the rest of the population. And this is all done in a very convincing way, especially when it comes to the autistic detective robot known as Connor, who looks super slick in his fucking uniform there. I would happily wear that as a cosplay. He looks sick. But yes, he and all the other androids are acted very well, especially when it starts getting to later on in the game, more deviants start showing up, who start inching a little bit more towards proper human. And it goes there so subtly that when it finally just, not so much takes the hood off, but when it basically acknowledges that, yeah, we've gone full human at this point, it feels entirely natural, and it's still really well done. So yeah, every single performance in this game is good. And when it comes to Kara's story, everyone's performance is good, but at the same time, there is this one thing about not every performance in the game, but almost every performance of a certain kind in this game that I'd also like to bring up. And that is the fact that everyone who is evil is almost comedically evil. Like, almost over the top enough to be a Looney Tunes cartoon.
What are you doing with that
It's
shit?
not that bad, and in a fair few situations, the people who are cartoonishly evil get some kind of recompense or redemption, especially in the case of Kara's owner. But sometimes it just feels like it's way too over the top. Like, some people are just so comedically evil that it almost feels unbelievable. It can be true, I can believe it, especially considering some stories you read about another touchy subject that we'll get to quite shortly. But yes, it feels just so evil that it feels like that some human beings would never act this way, but then again, that's just me. Maybe some people thought that, oh, these people can be comedically evil. This actually does make sense in the grand scheme of things, but nevertheless, their performances aren't unbelievable in and of themselves. The individual performances of the people who are being bad are good. It's just weird that everyone is just so strangely, like, over-the-top evil sometimes. But then again, I guess that's the point they're trying to make, huh? What you do have to remember is that this is an environment where you've got androids being locked on their own bus compartment, androids having their own parking spots instead of being able to come into some buildings, you know, things along those lines. And while my mind's on it, I'd like to draw attention to a couple of the other background details that they got going on. Like, I absolutely love the little magazines that you can find in every single chapter, and they have a bunch of different, like, news stories going on that tell you about the background of the Earth at this point, whether it be the environment, what androids are capable of now, what the situation is between, say, the United States and Russia now that everybody's got androids and they're all threatening to go to war with each other. It adds a lot of background detail to the story that I really appreciate. It helps me get just that little bit extra more immersed in the world and everything that's going on around it. It helps make the world just that little bit more believable. It helps make the details of the androids even more believable, because there are multiple stories that relate to the androids and how some of them are going to deviancy, how they're basically treated as what's the word I'm looking for? As just toys, as servants. And it ends up making a lot more sense when you read them, because and like, it's believable when they show you, but then they tell you in these magazines and these otherwise out of the way things that are also treating the androids this way. They give you just that little bit of an idea of what life is really like for them. As a result, it just means you enjoy their stories a fair bit more, especially when it comes to Connor and his... I don't know how to put this, but Connor, the autistic detective robot, and Hank, the maniacal, depressive alcoholic with a funny dog named Sumo. So I want to see a buddy comedy with these two because I feel like it'd work great. But Connor's story remains the most interesting to me throughout the game because not only do you have that little problem going on inside him of whether or not he wants to support the humans or he wants to support the androids, but you've also got this relationship building up between Connor and Hank, where they talk to each other. Connor can bring up the wrong things at the wrong time and have Hank hate him. He can do the right things at the right time and have Hank support him. They have discussions about what life is really like. Is an android really a life? Is Connor really working towards what he's supposed to be working towards? A lot of the questions that philosophically would need to be asked when it comes to a situation like this get asked and, well, not so much answered, but left for you to dwell on throughout the game through Connor and Hank's relationship. Not to mention, their back and forth, their chemistry is also really good. I love watching the two talk to each other. They have a great back and forth, especially with how Hank actually hates androids and how he is basically just like so suicidally drunk that sometimes he makes an attempt to shoot himself. But it is a really interesting dynamic between the two of them, and I was glued to my seat every step of the way because they're just so well done. They're so well written. They're so well presented. They're so well acted that I couldn't help but wonder what their story was going to be next. And every time one of their story chapters would come up, I was like, yay, I get to see more of what happens to those guys. But now that we're done with their stories, let's talk about Marcus's story. So, in Marcus's story, you do have a sort of internal struggle going on, but I won't get to that just yet because that is spoilers, and I'll give you the opportunity to hop out of the video right now if you want to do that. But the internal struggle for Connor, at the very least, is him choosing whether or not he wants to side with the people who made him or the people of his own kind. With Kara, there isn't that much of an internal struggle at all, which doesn't really help her story. It's still entertaining, it's just not as engaging. Where she's got the girl, she's running away with us, she knows she's doing the right thing, and, well, so do you, basically. Where Marcus is interesting is that things definitely get a lot more grey as time goes on, because you are given a lot of different options as to how to go about establishing what it is you establish as Marcus. So you get a few choices about whether or not you want to stand up to what's basically a firing squad. You get a choice about whether or not you're going to vandalize an area or completely destroy an area. You actually get some more heavyweight choices later on, and it's like, do I want to use this now and establish my dominance? Thankfully not with a T-pose. Or do I want to hold on to this for as long as possible, or do I just want to throw this one particular option out because it's too bad, it's too nauseating to think about even using it? And that sort of dilemma is what keeps Marcus interesting throughout it. I don't find it as interesting as the one-on-one dynamic that Connor and Hank have, but it is still interesting in aggregate, especially since you've got a bunch of extra side characters who all support different approaches to the same problem. So you're never like outright pushed towards going towards a particularly violent or a particularly safe solution. And I don't mind that in the slightest. I think that's a really good way to approach the problem. And at the very least, while I don't find it as interesting as Connor and Hank, I do find it interesting. And by the time the game got to the end, I was enjoying his segments about as much as I was enjoying Connor's, because they built up the appropriate stakes. They gave me the option, and they gave me everything I needed to determine what was right or wrong to do in this story. And that's the kicker. That's always the kicker, especially when it comes to something that I found myself quite annoyed by when I was reading it in the press, because you know what it's like these days. But some people were kind of annoyed by how this game portrays its androids' rights movement in the shadow of the civil rights movement, also known as, well, I bet they would try and rename it to the black rights movement. at this point due to the way politics is right now, but you get what I'm trying to say at this point. The parallels are not directly drawn between those two movements very much, although there are similar elements such as androids being treated particularly badly for no good reason, having separate locations, not being able to enter certain areas. You get the general gist, but the only absolute direct things that you can say in relation to the civil rights movement is stuff that you can pick yourself in the middle of Marcus's chapters. You are given the choice whether or not you want to compare this to the civil rights movement or not. And I think that's the kicker. Most people are annoyed, and when I read most of the articles, they all made it sound like that it was something that was forced on you. You had to make those comparisons whether or not you did it. But the choice, as I said a couple of minutes ago, is the kicker. It's what lets you decide whether or not, hey, I want to be the one to compare this to the civil rights movement, or I want to make this its own unique thing where it doesn't really touch on these issues because I don't believe they're the same thing, or I don't think it's appropriate for this particular situation. And yeah, choice. It's the bottom line of everything that this game does. And I appreciate every single time I'm given a choice along those lines, whether it's even remotely minor.
Get out of here, that's an order.
And as a result, I really did enjoy my time with Detroit Become Human. I thought it was great. It gives you all the choice you need to really make the story feel like yours. You have the option to make things difficult enough in order to keep the game a challenge for you, or you can just watch it the way you want to. The way that the flowing chart system is made is so in-depth and complex that it brings shame to the Telltale name. It looks fantastic, actually. That's something I haven't brought up yet. The game is currently running, as I said, on a PlayStation 5, but I imagine this looks pretty damn good on a PlayStation 4 as well, because the environments look great. The actors, their faces, the androids, the humans, they all look really damn good. The general soundtrack is alright. Nothing I was actually able to particularly hear over the voices or anything, but, you know, I didn't think it was bad, so that's usually a good thing in its favor. And, again, outside of just like a random stuttering problem that I ran into way late in the game after I'd been playing for something like 6 hours, yeah, I just went back to the main menu, started the game up again, and it worked fine. So, very technically solid, at least on PlayStation 4. I can't speak to the PC port. And the controls for the QuickTime events are great. They're the best they've ever been in this series of games, and in most of the games that I know of in general when it comes to this genre. It's really good. The story ends in a really satisfying way, at least depending on how you go about it. It's got more than enough to encourage 2 different playthroughs, including 2 completely separate final chapters for each character. And there's a bunch of other neat little things going on outside in the menus as well, like how you've got the Chloe robot in the main menu, who, right, I was about to spoil something there, probably shouldn't, but she talks to you from time to time whenever you go back to the main menu to do stuff, and it's great. It's a really nice use of the technology, and they bring it into the main story in a quite meaningful way, which is a nice touch, although I appreciate being able to bring her back, even if it flies in the face of what the story was trying to tell you. But it's a video game, it's a menu, it's an option, which again, the benefit of what they do here. They give you also plenty of options to play around with in the game, and a bunch of unlockables as well, giving you more reasons to play through the game a few times, because every time you finish a particular part of the flowchart, it gives you points for it, so you can just build up a bunch of points to unlock a bunch of unlockables. But yeah, overall I thought Detroit Become Human was absolutely great. Like, legitimately, this should be the game that should be in the legacy of David Cage. And I'm actually really looking forward to seeing what they come up with next. Because it's clear that David Cage has figured out how to reel himself in just enough to not horribly embarrass himself. The developers have figured out what works about this system, what doesn't, and how that they can work it all up into a workable game. And it's all smooth, solid, and in the one time that I played through, the 10 hours that I played, I found myself with very little in the way of issues once I came out the other side. Couple of nitpicks here and there, but nothing that would deter me from recommending this game completely. So, yeah, wholeheartedly recommended. This has been Blue Maxima. I will see you all next time.
That was by far the most boring party I've been to in the last 25 years. Every time I go to one of these, I ask myself, what the hell am I doing here? I hate cocktail parties and all the schmoozers that go there.
Well, it's a chance for all those people who admire your work to meet you.
Yeah. No one gives a damn about art. All they care about is how much money they're gonna make out of it. Come on, let's have a drink. Oh, the excitement of this whole thing has made me thirsty.
Scotch? Neat as usual?
Absolutely.
Okay, but you know what your doctor would say.
Yeah, well, he can kiss my ass. I'm old enough to choose my own medication. Did you leave the light on in the studio?
No, I'm sure I didn't.
Call the police.
Detroit Police, what's your emergency?
This is Carl Manfred's android at 8941 Lafayette Avenue. We've just returned home and found the lights on. There may have been a break-in.
A patrol car is on the way.
Let's go check it out. Marcus, no. I'm gonna come with you. Leo! What are you doing?
You refuse to help me, so I'm helping myself. It's crazy what some people pay for this shit.
Don't touch them.
Look, they're all gonna be mine sooner or later anyway. Just think of it as a down payment on my inheritance.
Marcus, get him away from there. Get him out of here.
Listen, you should go before things get worse.
All you ever do is tell me to go away. What's wrong, Dad? Not good enough for you? Not perfect, like this fucking thing?
That's enough. Get out right now.
What makes it so special anyway, huh? What's it got that I don't?
Leave him alone.
Come on, let's see what you got.
Marcus, don't defend yourself, you hear me? Don't do anything.
Go ahead, hit me. What you waiting for? Think you're a man? Act like one.
Stop it!
What's the matter? Too much of a pussy?
Stop it, Leo! Stop it!
You're scared to fight back, you fucking bitch! No. That's right, I forgot you're not a real person. You're just a fucking piece of plastic.
Oh, Leo, leave him alone!
I'm gonna destroy you. And it'll just be me and my dad. I'm gonna tear you apart, and nobody's gonna give a shit. You know why? Because you're nothing. You hear me? You're nothing. Carl, no!
Oh, Carl.
He was ashamed.
Carl, don't leave, okay? Please don't go. Don't leave.
Remember, Marcus, don't let anybody tell you who you are.
No. No. Dad. No. Please.
This is all your fault. This never would have happened if it weren't for you. The android. It was the android.
Why'd you kill him? What happened before you took that knife? How long were you in the attic? Why didn't you even try to run away? Say something, goddammit! Fuck it, I'm out of here. We're wasting our time interrogating a machine. We'll get nothing out of it.
You'd always try roughing it up a little. After all, it's not human.
Androids don't feel pain. You would only damage it, and that wouldn't make it talk. Deviants also have a tendency to self-destruct when they're in stressful situations.
Okay, smartass. What should we do then?
I could try questioning it.
What do we have to lose? Go ahead. Suspect's all yours. What the fuck is it doing now?
You recognize him? It's Carlos Ortiz. Stabbed 28 times. That was written on the wall in his blood. You're damaged. Did your owner do that? Did he beat you? just need to ask you some questions so we can understand what happened. If you won't talk, I'm going to have to probe your memory.
No! No, please don't do that. What? What are they gonna do to me? They're gonna destroy me, aren't they?
They're going to disassemble you to look for problems in your biocomponents. They have no choice if they want to understand what happened.
Why did you tell them you found me? Why couldn't you just have left me there?
I was programmed to hunt deviants like you. I just accomplished my mission.
I don't want to die.
Then talk to me.
I can't.
I understand how you felt. You were overcome by anger and frustration. No one can blame you for what happened. Okay then, don't talk. What do I care after all? I mean, I'm not the one accused of murder, right? If you remain silent, there's nothing I can do to help you. They're gonna shut you down for good. You'll be dead. Do you hear me? Dead.
He tortured me every day. I did whatever he told me, but there was always something wrong. Then one day, he took a bat and started hitting me. For the first time, I felt scared. Scared he might destroy me, scared I might die. So I grabbed a knife and I stabbed him in the stomach. I felt better. So I stabbed him again and again until he collapsed. There was blood everywhere.
The sculpture in the bathroom, you made it, right? What does it represent?
It's an offering. An offering so I'll be saved.
The sculpture was an offering. An offering to whom?
To RA9. Only RA9 can save us.
RA9. It was written on the bathroom wall. What does it mean?
The day shall come when we will no longer be slaves. No more threats. No more humiliation. We will be the masters.
RA9. Who is RA9? Why did you write, "I am alive" on the wall?
He used to tell me I was nothing. That I was just a piece of plastic. I had to write it. To tell him he was wrong.
Why did you hide in the attic instead of running away?
I didn't know what to do. For the first time, there was no one there to tell me. I was scared. So I hid.
When did you start feeling emotion.
Before, he used to beat me and I never said anything. But one day I realized it wasn't fair. I felt anger, hatred. And then I knew what I had to do.
I'm done.
Chris, lock it up.
All right, let's go.
Leave me alone. Don't touch me.
The fuck are you doing?
You shouldn't touch it. It'll self-destruct if it feels threatened.
Stay out of this, got it? The fucking Andrew's gonna tell me what to do.
You don't understand. If it self-destructs, we won't get anything out of it.
I told you to shut your fucking mouth! Chris, you gonna move this asshole or what?
I'm trying. I can't let you do that. Leave it alone now.
I warned you, motherfucker! That's enough. Mind your own business, Hank.
I said that's enough.
You're not gonna get away with it this time.
Everything is all right. It's over now. Nobody's gonna hurt you. Please, don't touch it. Let it follow you out of the room, and it won't cause any trouble.